Hey, what's up, Plus Ultra fam, and welcome to Plus Ultra Podcast number 25. It has been a pretty good long time since we did a podcast episode at the time of recording this one, but it has actually been even longer since I have touched on the What If Goku Was Trained by Master Shen series that I started in October of 2018, my first year of content creation. So what this podcast episode is going to be is a reintroduction to the Plus Ultra Podcast and the new way we'll probably be doing it, which is it will be more of a free-form type of content that I can get out when I know my longer videos that take more editing, visuals, all that effort that goes into them that makes them turn out so long and take so long to actually make just aren't possible to get out in a suitable amount of time. And that'll probably be a week when the Plus Ultra Podcast is uploaded, or maybe some form of live content, just something where I can give you guys some entertainment, something to do where it does not take a ton of time and effort to put out the piece of content. I also want to get into real quick why this story was kind of left on the back burner for so long before we actually do finish it up. One thing I want to say about this story is it was definitely one of my first ones that I ever thought of. I remember I gave this idea to, I know at least Dragon Ball Dad. I don't remember if I got in contact with Moscow X, even though I cited him as being one of the people that I had suggested this idea to in part one. I think I might have just commented it to him on one of his videos, but at the time I just wasn't really big enough to get into contact with him, and I haven't really talked to him as of yet either way. Still, I'm aware that he's like somebody who will definitely work with and speak to smaller content creators, like no matter how the size. So that being said, I don't think he'll be doing this story anytime soon, and there are still people who do like it. And beyond that, I just want all my stories that I've started to have some type of conclusive ending on them on the channel. There was also a point when, again, this was one of my first Dragon Ball stories, and I remember I got this I think it was a really helpful piece of criticism at one point, but it was that this one person felt like the story had not changed from the canon version in like very meaningful ways. And I think that was given around the second part of it. So this was after a part when I had kind of admitted like, hey, there aren't really many changes I can make here just because of where the timeline is currently. But as we go on, more and more can kind of come about. And I don't think I fulfilled that as much as I could have, which in this new version I'm trying to do, I'm going to try and follow through that a bit more. But I could definitely see where that criticism was coming from. That said, I think that criticism also kind of made me a bit hesitant to continue the series from there, because I couldn't imagine too many specific changes at that time, which sucks, because I think at that point I don't know, I don't think I had thought out this story as far as I probably should have. I had a lot of cool concepts and ideas for it initially, but at some point the passion and the actual, big explosive ideas that you see in some of my newer what ifs, where there are really big critical set pieces that kind of like show you, there are certain eras and parts of the story where things happen, things are important, things change, the changes that happen from canon mean something and are relevant, and that just wasn't really present in the Shen Train Goku / Shen Turning Good series at one point. That was also an issue with it. I ended up shifting my vision with it so much that it kind of became really cluttered. So without further ado, please sit back, relax, grab your popcorn drink, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and enjoy the definitive version of What If Shen Trained Goku. So upon reviewing this series, which was very nostalgic for me, I have realized that a lot of it actually does hold up. Again, this is probably because a lot of plot points don't change, but that being said, a lot of the things that I say in that original series will be kind of repeated here, or at least paraphrased to save time. Though the first major change to note is that the Divine Water mix-up that is made in part 2 will not be made here. That was another issue with this series. I don't think I had a good review or like rewatch or re-experiencing of the Dragon Ball story in a decent long time. So there were certain aspects and details of the story that just weren't as foggy and crisp in my mind as they are now, that I've done a full anime rewatch and a full manga reread and all that stuff. And that stronger grasp on the canon narrative just helps the storytelling as a whole. So our story starts as we're familiar with the major change being that Master Roshi still has the Banjo vein in his timeline. It is used to put out the fire on Ox King's mountain, which saves his castle, and in this timeline it is left with him to one day return to his old master. From here, the rest of the original arc of Dragon Ball plays out pretty much as normal, ending with the Dragon Team stranded in the desert and coming across Master Shen and his students, as contrived as that is. They are currently practicing the Dodan Ray in a place where they can't damage their own dojo or get anybody hurt. Master Shen was very adamant that harming someone when there was no money involved just was a waste of time. Intrigued by the technique, Goku tries it and partially succeeds, much like he did with the Kamehameha in the original timeline. Because of this, Master Shen sees promise and a possible cash cow for him in Goku, and he offers to train him in the Crane School way, in the process making Tenshinhan worried that his training will be horned in on. With nothing else to do and excited at the prospect of growing stronger, Goku accepts this offer. This leads to Goku joining the Crane School, and most likely doing a lot of similar physical limit-breaking training that Master Roshi was about to start his new student Krillin on. Though this is where our new story diverts from the original part 1 that I did. Goku does not attend the 21st World Martial Arts Tournament, at least not as an official fighter. He is initially too busy with training exercises that he's been competing in against his new three-eyed rival with, in a race to see who could achieve the Crane School's flying technique first. Meanwhile, the 21st World Tournament fires off with all its canon participants and attendants there but Goku, and two people who weren't there in canon, Ox King and Chi-Chi. They are here to hopefully do three things. Number 1, return the Bancho fan to Master Roshi. Number 2, possibly earn a bit more money to add to their treasure hoard after it's been surrounded by flames for a bit. And number 3, allow Ox King to test the training he's went over in the last 3 months. The need for the Bancho fan had made him realize how far he slacked off after leaving his master, and he determinedly begins training on an Air Force-based technique, like the Soaring Fist. Something that if a fire ever were to go off on his mind again, he would surely be able to handle it. So, he'll be replacing Goku in the tournament, and he would definitely be stronger than when he met Goku. There, where he was likely as stronger than, say, Krillin or Yamcha at this point in time in canon. And all while having a very similar technique that Jackie Chun used to eliminate Yamcha. Under this circumstance, I think it'd be very easy to have Ox King versus Jackie Chun set up as the final match. And something tells me Ox King, unlike Yamcha, would easily be able to see through the disguise, and would likely respectfully forfeit. If not, I think Roshi and he would go head-to-head for a while, with Roshi inevitably coming out on top. But it would be kind of cool if he maybe showed Ox King the buff form and maybe like bulked up to the same size as him to throw him out or something like that. Though either or, Jackie Chun is going to have a good match, and he isn't going to be pushed into busting any moons here, so he is by no means pushed to his limits. And that said, when the tournament seems to be over, it is interrupted by a small and mysterious warrior dropping onto the stage. Unknown to everyone else, this is Goku, wearing a Crane School Kipao, I believe it's called, and a large identity-obscuring straw hat. So, just like a Dai Li agent from Avatar: The Last Airbender pretty much. During his training to learn to fly, neither Goku or Tenshinhan are able to master the technique, causing Shen to liken them to his old rival, the Turtle Hermit. And in his mind, he determines that it's time the two's training is wrapped up. And this leads Goku to learning of the connection between the two, and the fact that the Turtle Hermit had likely entered his students, and maybe even himself, into the current World Martial Arts Tournament to test them. It seemed like something he'd do. Now, keep in mind that the original timeline, Shen specifies that he'd only really thought of entering his students into the tournament after he'd heard that Jackie Chun, and being one of the students of the Turtle School, had won it before. Here though, as he is a bit more of a prominent character, I'm trying to give Shen a bit more spotlight and make him seem a bit more realistic. I think him knowing a bit more about Roshi and maybe understanding how he thinks would convey a greater sense of these two characters having known each other for a very long time. And now Goku begins bugging Shen about going to the tournament that he had absolutely nothing to gain from. That is, until he gets a very sinister idea. He decides that he will allow Goku to attend the tournament if he promises to steal the prize money from the winner. Now remember, Goku does have morality, but Goku is also really damn gullible. So I think if Shen were to word this correctly, and if he's been around Goku for long enough, he should be able to do that, he could probably convince Goku to do this. All he'd really have to explain is, as the money is won from a martial art tournament, if you are to defeat the martial artist who won it, therefore you are stronger than that martial artist, and the money would rightfully be yours. And if one has the reasoning skills of a possibly brain-damaged 12-year-old Saiyan, I don't think it's going to be too easy for them to go through and see the logical inconsistencies of this argument. From here, Jackie Chun versus the Mystery Fighter can go very much like how Goku versus Jackie Chun went in canon, though Goku's hat is going to keep him from seeing the moon the entire time, so no great ape. Meaning he and Roshi push each other to the limits of their martial arts prowess. And yet, due simply to a lack of experience, Goku still loses to Jackie Chun, who also does the deed of identifying the mysterious fighter in front of his friends. Roshi and Co take Goku to dinner where Chi-Chi and all the others angrily ask what that new master of Goku's is teaching him. He explains the training mission he'd been sent on, and is reasoning that if he bested the martial artist with the money, then he technically had the right to take it. Roshi ignores all that and more or less stakes his claim on Goku as a legacy student. He'd met him first, and he was literally grandfathered into the Turtle School. Not only could he better guide Gohan's grandson, but ultimately, he was stronger than Shen and could better train him. And here's where another small change from the original part 1 I made comes into play. Instead of Goku being excited at the offer, yet not wanting to be disrespectful and disloyal, and at least go back to the Crane School and say goodbye and properly finish his training under Shen, here Goku thinks this, but Shen actually arrives and interrupts this. revealing that he'd come to supervise Goku and see how he did. But he doesn't reveal that Goku could have likely won that if he fought more underhandedly like he'd been trying to teach him. Mostly because he and Roshi were already in each other's faces, arguing over which one of them was stronger. And from here, part 1 ends similarly. But Shen and Roshi declare that they will both enter themselves and their students into the 22nd World Martial Arts Tournament. And so, the Crane vs. Turtle School arc has begun. And with that, Goku is scooped up by Shen, and to show off, flown off incredibly fast. This is also when Yamcha will be earlier inducted into the Turtle School. Though with our small change to Ox King, Roshi also gets an idea and asking him to return to the Turtle School and help in aiding in the training of his new suit, since this will ultimately lead to him having more time for his own training. Which obviously I think Ox King would because friendship, and he could possibly find a suitor for Chi-Chi that way. Also, the cliffhanger from part 1 still rings true. As Shen and Goku return to the Crane School, they find someone new there teaching Tenshinhan and Chaozu. Tao Pai Pai has been called upon for the same task Roshi is commissioning Ox King for. But of course, we know that this will likely be a different form of training, and Tao is going to be tougher and much more demanding likely. And you see, here is where I think the major thematic change of the story kind of took place. I do think that at the end of the day, this should have been 2 really different scenarios. One of these being a what if the Crane School raised Goku? A story in which Goku lands and is either raised by Tao Pai Pai or Shen himself, meaning that his influence is the first on him. You don't get much Grandpa Gohan, Bulma, Master Roshi, all these really positive and sweet influences that kind of led to Goku being the character we know him as today, not being there initially for him. In those first 12 or 11 or 10 years, however long the story goes before you start doing major aspects of it, being under Shen or Tao Pai Pai, who shouldn't really be considered good at that time. And the other one being the exact opposite to that scenario. Something where Master Shen is still able to influence Goku in terms of a training aspect, but maybe his personality and character is purified or made good or just made a better ally quicker, that he is able to stay in the story past the 10 arc and, be a major player in it, because I think he kind of should be, just based off the backstory we get for him. And this is ultimately the one I start to try and do in the original series I did, which is why you saw that series later titled What If Master Shen Turned Good, where I also plan to at one point go back and do the whole Master Shen or Tao Pai Pai or the Crane School raising Goku storyline. But all that said, expect this one to lean a lot more into the Master Shen turning good route as we go forward. So Tao is just a terrible teacher for Goku. In every aspect other than helping him increase his power, he is not suitable for this job, and Goku is not suitable to be his student. At this point, I also think that Chaozu would at least be very friendly with Goku, while Tien is beginning to become an ally of Goku. This would still lead to the 3 of them deciding at some point, hey, we don't really want to train under this guy, so we're gonna leave. Or, if you want to make a really cool change here that I didn't do with canon, I think another cool way of doing that would be have Chaozu and Goku leave. Have Tien say, no, I want to go, I really, really do, but at the same time, I also need to get stronger. I need to get way, way stronger than I currently am. Because right now, this little kid Goku has been staying on my tail this entire time. And if this training is something that he himself doesn't think he can do, then by completing it, I am better than Goku. It's not a route we would have to take, and I'm not even sure I'm going to take it for this rewrite of the story. It's just one that I am now considering as I redo it. Because at the end of the day, that route still has a very similar ending to what I did in canon, which is just Goku and Tien have some kind of, big clash, big rivalry fight at the World Martial Arts Tournament that culminates in Tien probably still winning. In this situation, I think that I would actually give it to Goku though, just because he has a training partner when Tien just lost one. He has already admitted that he probably doesn't like Tao, and unless you change a few more things, that could probably not really help Tien very much. So let's just stick to what we did originally and just have all 3 say, piss on it, we're just going to leave. And they strike themselves from the Crane School and leave. And they're going to be their own masters in the last few months before the World Martial Arts Tournament. Meanwhile, the Turtle School is literally stronger than ever. Roshi has ramped up his training as an individual and does it openly in front of his students, which really motivates them all. Meanwhile, this stronger version of Ox King takes up a lot of the day-to-day parts of the training, and he also begins training Chi-Chi earlier like you'd assume he did for the 23rd tournament. Partly because giving her the tools to defend herself is just the best way to protect her. And also, this could just be a really good way to attract a suitor or a career. As for Chi-Chi, she really wants to prove to Goku that what Master Roshi said was true. This is the best school for him. And if he joins it, he'll be closer to her. So to do that, she needs to be an example of that and be really, really strong. And no, I don't think that this situation could maybe lead to her possibly liking, say, Krillin. That is, unless his personality is changed a lot, and remember, he doesn't have Goku's influence. So at this point, I think he would kind of still be a bit unlikable like he was when he first entered the story. Tao returns to Shen to complain about their students ditching him, but in difference from the original part 2 I made, Shen does not focus on this. Instead, he wants to make the best of the situation and tells Tao that they will train together for the last few months of their training period. By the end, he is sure he will see them at the World Martial Arts Tournament, and once more, he has to defeat his rival. So the absolute saddest part about this Redux project is it is not a full-on Redux project like I did with my recent Stainku one, where these changes I'm making, I really want to delve into them and see how they're going to change things. Because this, like, Turtle School versus Crane School tournament arc I've just set up is a really interesting idea that I'd love to explore more. But I feel like at the end of the day, it would end in a really, oh, okay, that was a cool arc to get to this point, but like, I feel like we could have just jumped to this point without the whole arc. Dragon Ball is a story that is very prolific. The What If community of Dragon Ball has done a lot with the story. So there are some times and spaces when I think some things just aren't too worth expanding on. This definitely isn't the case, because I think this is just a really inherently interesting situation, but this project is more focused on giving this story a really satisfying conclusion, much rather than just elaborating on some of the ideas that I've had when I thought about it going forward in the future now. And who knows, maybe at some point I really will get to actually expand on this idea and this one certain concept and maybe some new version of the story, or maybe a collaboration on somebody else's channel. You never know. But that means that this project will have pretty much the SparkNotes version of it. So again, really cool tournament arc, which I think should probably crescendo with the Shen versus Roshi matchup that I've been setting up here. I know I play with that idea of Roshi using the max power form against Ox King, but to bring that right back, I think a really interesting idea to do with this here would be having Shen learn his own form of that technique, or maybe something very much like it, that he can use against Roshi and give them a really cool, even fight with these two masters of the earthling crafts at this point. Because as I went back and reviewed this series, I did realize how big a focal point that I wanted to make these two in this story to be. Because they are kind of supposed to be there. They fought alongside Master Mutaito when this planet was truly pushed to the brink of being taken over by somebody else. But to be fair, the entirety of the King Piccolo flashback is just a really wasted opportunity. Because in that instance, it really feels to me like Master Roshi and Master Shen should have probably been two of Dragon Ball's most iconic duos. Other than that, maybe Tao gets to take on the stronger Ox King, who would probably get stronger even from, the last time when he got stronger. I don't know if he'd win that fight. My point is the tournament will be really fun, and there'll be different outcomes. You'd also have Goku, Tenshinhan, and Chaozu in attendance in some form, with Goku and Ten maybe wanting to show the fruits of their training, and maybe trying to fight and surpass the power of Shen and Roshi after they have their fight, or maybe even interrupting their fight and saying that, hey, we're gonna, see who can, take out who and make this a battle royale, whatever you want to do. I don't know, man. I think there are really cool ways to write that sequence. So just that, again, I am trying to focus on giving the story a conclusion rather than focusing on every small part of it like I would if I was doing an actual drawn out what if series. Now for part 3, I actually only want to make one major change to this entire part, and that is the person who goes to get the power pole in the 4-star Dragon Ball is not Krillin, who barely knows Goku and really doesn't like him very much in this timeline. It is the early trained Chi-Chi, who would be either stronger or maybe a tad weaker than Canon Krillin at that point, resulting in Tambourine killing her. Obviously, Goku gets enraged because this is somebody who actually met earlier, and who probably through seeing her having trained with Master Roshi and, reuniting with her over this whole tournament arc, would probably be really happy to have his friend back and see that she's getting stronger, maybe want to fight her someday. These are like really cool moments for Goku, and now he's having to deal with the first real major death of one of his friends. Because remember how this scenario has been set up, the death of Bora would have never happened for Goku. In fact, the way it happened in the original part 2 was that because Tao Pai Pai was training Tenshinhan, Goku, and Chaozu, he was unavailable for the Red Ribbon Army. And after defeating and leaving Tao, Goku decides that he wants to take back his grandfather's Dragon Ball, leading to him taking on and much easier taking down the Red Ribbon Army in this timeline. Not just because he's stronger, but also because he has two really powerful allies. So, obviously Goku gets way angrier than he did in canon, though Roshi and Shen successfully hold him back from storming off and splitting up their group. They then form a truce to ally together and take down King Piccolo, which still, like in part 3, culminates in a big all-out battle against the old Demon King, ending with a surprise appearance by Kami, who uses the Mafuba, and saves the brave souls trying to fix his mistake, thus ending part 3, very similar to its original. Part 4 also starts very similar just because of the route we're going for this one. But here, Chi-Chi is revived and the trio of new Guardians in Shen, Roshi, and Mutaito is formed, as Earth's defenses are bolstered by adding to and strengthening the members of what we know as the Z-Fighters. And here's where that concept I had of all of Earth's, mightiest warriors, those who have entered the World Martial Arts tournaments and made it into the finals and been named characters for a long time, being allowed to continue to climb the ranks as martial artists by going through the certain trials of their world and just getting stronger, and if need be, one day being able to be effective guardians of the world. Not in the Kami or I'm the god of Earth sense, but just in, hey, this is my planet, I'm really strong, I'm not just gonna let you come in here and take it from me. And personally, I feel like you could do this with most of the named characters from the World Martial Arts Tournament. Like, I would absolutely love to see Garan, brought back to fight longer and maybe expand on some of his abilities. If he were to learn key control, maybe be able to expand on his merry-go-round gum ability. Or characters like King Choppa, Nam, Pomput. There are lots of really cool characters who don't get to have much time in the story just because they're human and they're only really needed for one really cool fight with Goku maybe before they're going on out of the story forever. Some of these guys show back up to be referenced or killed by King Piccolo, but that's not really the best way to utilize these characters, I think. And that was ultimately a really big theme of this scenario. So, like in part 4, Redux attacks during a large party after a time skip, but with all the strong fighters there backing up his younger brother, he just isn't going to pull out a W like this. Though they spare him, allowing him to leave the Earth. Which is when he tells Vegeta, who decides that he and Nappa will conquer the Earth, killing Raditz, Kakarot, and all on their way in the process. And that, my friends, is where part 4 ended, and my notes for this podcast end as well. And that is because I would really like for my last thoughts for this one to be very, very freeform, and going through certain aspects and parts of the story that I think I had always had in my head to do at some point, but I had just never really gotten around to doing. Because of how that story kind of went down. The kind of tragedy of this series is that it wasn't extremely popular off jump, so its following and the support for it kind of grew slowly. And while that was happening, I was writing not only other Dragon Ball stories, but just other stories in general. The amount of, hey, please continue so-and-so what if, hey, please continue so-and-so what if, X and X, whatever it may be. That's always going to be a part of it. There's literally no way I can escape that. I'm going to have to deal with that the rest of my life probably. But the amount of it you would see for this scenario and the scenarios kind of tied into it, it just was never as high as some of those other stories, which I don't think is a bad thing. That's just the way in which you can gauge what your audience does and doesn't want to see very much. But that said, this story did have an audience. This story has had support. This story has had fans of it. So for them, from here on out, I'm going to try and give a kind of superficial outline of what I think the story would have went from if that part 5 that came out, and kind of going on to the finale of the what if Master Shen turned good route of this kind of scenario. So number one, it all hinges on that idea that kind of came of Master Shen and Master Roshi forming this kind of really important duo in terms of the Earth and the Earth's mightiest warriors. And then you add Master Mutaito into that and make this kind of trinity that now form the new guardianship of Earth. The Z Fighters are made up of a lot of people. Just off the top of my head, you can now count Goku, Yamcha, Krillin, Tien, Chaozu, Chi-Chi, who else? Ox King can be put in there. Tao Pai Pai can be put in there. Roshi, Shen, Mutaito can be put in there. Any of the Nam can be put in there. This would really easily turn into a culmination of all the what if so-and-so became a Z Fighter scenarios that I think a lot of people have done. Honestly, with this setup, you could probably really easily do something with the filler character Pigaro that we ended up using in the all canon filler what if relay that I did with Smugstick and Monocool. Because that is kind of what this story would be about. It would be about the Earthlings being really proactive, really gung-ho, really we're not just going to sit down and take it just because you're an alien race and you may be a bit stronger than us, and trying to, take it to the enemies. So I think what would happen from Raditz coming back and telling everybody that, hey, two Saiyans stronger than me now are coming to kill all of us because I couldn't take you down myself. It is either we work together or we are burnt to a crisp together. Either or, we have to kind of act cooperatively in this. I think from there, the holy trinity of fighters, Mutaito, Shen, and Roshi, would have some really harsh decisions on their plate. Notably, one really big issue here is Goku is alive, and he is likely their strongest fighter, and could likely benefit the most from the highest level of training they could give to him, which would be allowing him to go seek King Kai, but he'd have to die for that. Though I think this one is really easily remedied by Mutaito or Shen, or maybe just all of them putting their heads together and coming up with the idea that we already have fighters who have been killed in the fight with Raditz. The best thing to do would probably be to make, again, lemonade out of lemons from that, and have them go and travel Snake Way while going to King Kai's. They may not be able to get as strong as Goku could probably get there, but and that you also have your Goku still here on Earth with you, which can give you a big boon to your other forces. The new training regimen for the Earth's mightiest forces is that Raditz and Goku will act as the Saiyan invaders, while all the Earthlings gang up against them to try and fight them. And that means that this would be a pretty two-pronged training regimen. That means that both the Saiyans are getting really good battle experience, they're being pushed to their limits, while also allowing the Earthlings to be pushed to their limits as well, while also learning to fight together, learning how to take on Saiyans. It's just a really good strategy to take on the current threat they're trying to do. And since this would be an instance in which you just have a ton of training partners and possibly access to maybe the odd Zenkai if a Senzu being is available and Goku or Raditz are just beat up really, really badly, this would be an instance in which they could still get some really, really good training just on Earth, normal gravity, notably really weak by comparison training, partners, but still growth would be really, really immense. I think by the end of that, it will be very hard to have anyone under the power of a Cyberman that was, just training with Goku and Raditz in that time. I think Raditz and Goku would probably really easily surpass full power Nappa, with Raditz probably still being the strongest in that situation, and Goku just being a tiny bit under him, just the smallest amount in that instance. Because remember, after the first fight they'd have, he'd probably get a big Zenkai after that, and they're still training after that to do, so it's a head start. Meanwhile, any of your fighters who went to King Kai's would also really likely be around that 5,000 to 8,000 power level range, while also maybe having the Spirit Bomb and Kaioken. And if you consider a concept that I played with in the Piccolo Turn Good early scenario, the idea of having two characters in a single arc who want to charge a single Spirit Bomb could be a really, really interesting way to use that technique. Because what if you could have one person charge the energy while the other holds the person off, or maybe they both charge the energy while one person holds them off, or maybe they both throw the Spirit Bomb at someone. I don't know how you do it, but listen, there are ways you can use that type of fighting technique that could really make the Spirit Bomb more viable in combat for them. So I think really easily the Cybermen and Nappa go down. Vegeta is the biggest issue there, but with literally everyone working together, maybe Raditz and Goku going feral and going into Great Ape or something, or just Raditz, he's already lost his tail at that point, and just trying their hardest, they defeat Vegeta. And in this instance, I would also like to say that Vegeta will probably not be given his canon character spot. I think in this scenario, you would probably give that to Raditz just because he's earned it more so far. And it would also be a bit contrived to keep Vegeta along when you've already got this massive group of, this army of Z fighters pretty much. And now that does bring up all new story positions and things that could be happening, what's happening here. Is Kami still alive? Are the Dragon Balls on Earth? Even so, I think it would still be somewhat unavoidable to go to Namek just because you've probably already revived a few people once before and probably can't do it again, and they probably died at the hands of Vegeta or Nappa here or something like that. So you're probably still going to need to go to Namek. But here, there won't be a Vegeta involved because I think Vegeta would either be killed by just everyone fighting him. It's just, there's so much power, so many people going against him. In that instance, it's going to be a lot harder for him to get by. And I don't know if this version of Goku would be so willing to spare an opponent. That's another thing we've kind of played with in this scenario. Is that the influence that the Crane Skull has on Goku isn't completely just, up and gone as it goes. And also, that's just something we see in canon Dragon Ball. At some point, Goku just stops sparing opponents because it's just hey, this keeps biting me in the ass when I do it. And from here, I do think the story just starts to match up with canon really, really well. The only difference being the way the Guardianship of Earth is set up and the really big amount of Z fighters we have. You also probably wouldn't have a Trunks there, or you could if you just want to leave him as a timeline constant, or just make him Raditz's son or daughter or something like that. I do think that the most interesting part of the story would be how long does this really big group of Z fighters remain completely relevant? Is there a point when that kind of lesson of cooperation that Goku has learned, the lesson that, oh, if I have people to train with me, I can get stronger, being close to these comrades of mine is beneficial for me as a fighter, as a martial artist, when does that start to peter out to where it's like, okay, but I can kind of just get stronger by training on my own, or train with Raditz, or maybe just going into other worlds, stuff like that? When does that aspect of Goku's, canon characterization start to come back in for him? Does it ever? These are the really interesting themes and concepts that this scenario was kind of meant to play with, that I just don't think I put enough thought into when I initially started out with. But for this one, for this version of it, I think that's what I want to do. I want to have Raditz's child in some form return to the past with a warning for our future allies, and tell him that a Dr. Gero, who was even more hellbent, because it wasn't just Son Goku who was such a nuisance to him, it was Son Goku and that three-eyed, fighter, and that Teleconnect person, who were all stronger than their canon versions during the Red Ribbon Army arc, causing him to make maybe this really more advanced version of 17, 18, or just his androids as a whole, and possibly doing some small changes to the android saga. But after that, I don't think you can change much. The Buu arc comes in, and just having more Z fighters doesn't really matter in that arc. There, it's just, hey, more of the people who Buu wipes out, we just know more of the names, and we care more about them. That's kind of all that really you get from that. Going into like the Yo Son Goku and Friends Return special, that'd be kind of fun because you have that really big group. Battle of Gods, again, it's not really going to help much. In fact, it's going to hinder them more, because with just Raditz, unless you want to have everything act just as it did with Vegeta, you won't have enough Saiyans to do the God Ritual. Resurrection F as well, it doesn't even have anything that's really going to change much there. I think some of the best arcs for this scenario would probably be the Tournament of Power, because the whole idea of teamwork, working together, those would be not scenarios, but themes and motifs established in the beginning of the Dragon Ball series for this instance in this timeline. So that'd be really fun. Also the Mora arc, the arc when you finally get, Earth's forces standing up and kind of going to this big war. Like, I feel like I had kind of been waiting on in Dragon Ball for a really long time. That would also be really, really fun and cohesive and rewarding for this storyline. But other than that, yeah, this was a story that I didn't put enough thought into when I first started it. I still maintain love for it. It's still one of the first what if scenarios I've ever thought of. I still think it's a really interesting concept that hopefully more people at some point will do. I notice a lot of the time that I'll have one of the first ideas for a certain scenario or something like that, and I won't see many other versions of it. And then after I do it, there might be way, way more. But I absolutely have to say, where I'm usually never thinking about the fact that that is something that can happen, and it usually does happen with, like, some what if scenarios, or it's a really popular scenario, it's just a really good idea. I'm very much hoping somebody will pick up this story and try their own version of it. Just because I think it does deserve its own main series what if title, where it is given the time, love, passion, and focus to really flourish and become its own really iconic, really meaningful alternate Dragon Ball timeline, because I think it deserves that. But with this timestamp we are currently at, we would now be exceeding the full length of all 4 of the original videos combined together, which means that I can now title this a full story video. But I'm joking. I really much appreciate you guys for watching that original series. If you've just now discovered it by seeing this one and you're just going back to rewatch it, very glad you did. If you have not yet, please do. It is much more narratively focused, where I'm not going to be breaking the fourth wall sometimes and talking directly to the viewers. But be aware that it is one of the first videos ever created for the channel, one of the first series ever created for the channel. There are portions of that series where my audio quality is just god awful, and I can't stand by it for that exact reason alone. But I think it is definitely worth seeing, just to see where the channel has come in terms of writing, visuals, audio, all that stuff. And also just, it supports the channel to go back and watch that stuff. Finally, remember the rules of the PlusUltraPodcast. You guys can suggest scenarios that you don't think I'd probably do in a main what if scenario that will be done here in the PlusUltraPodcast. I am completely willing to do those if they're really good ideas. Make sure if you see somebody who has suggested an idea that you want to see, make sure you give that comment a like. Make sure you leave a like on the actual video itself and stuff like that. And I am really happy to be getting back to the Plus Ultra Podcast. It has been a really nice creative outlet for me just to have times when I can maybe interview with somebody who I love in the community who can kind of come on and talk to me about something, or just, ramble about a topic for a while without having to, put 50 plus hours of editing on top of it, But that does it for this one, you guys. Remember to take care of yourselves and the world around you. Black lives matter, trans rights are human rights, and I love you. See you guys next time.